Hello, I'm Rusty Nelson and welcome to my video blog. You go out and you buy that brand new printer, get it all set up, so you think. Well, there's a few more things you may want to think about doing to get it running at its optimum best. That's what we're going to take a look at today. And also, we're going to take a look at exactly what this is. Actually got a lot that we're going to cover here in a very short period of time. This is not actually the setup of the machine. That I did a complete setup and unbox in another video up until the point where you could actually push the button and say print. So please jump over to check that one out if you haven't seen it already. If you haven't signed up for the blog, rustynelsonblog.com, all one word. And you'll be I don't spam anybody, so you don't have to worry about that. This is all just for fun and get the information out to you. But like I said, we're going to cover a lot of stuff today about this printer. It could be used for almost any printer. After you get it set up and you think you're ready to push that button, there may be some things you want to think about. We're going to cover firmware, drivers, utility box, nozzle check. We're going to do a head alignment, talk about paper mismatch, and let's get started. So we're going to start right here with the on-printer screen, jump over to the computer, do some stuff there, and we're going to come back to the printer itself and do a head alignment and a nozzle check. Let's get to it. This is what the home screen will look like once you get a low ink level warning. Hitting the right arrow key next to the OK button. This is what the notice list looks like, obviously saying I need new ink. The thing is I actually broke open a cartridge and looked at how much ink was left in there, and I'll show you a picture right now. And there was a fair amount of ink level in there, even though it said that it was low. After talking to Canon, they told me that if you run out of ink, the printer will actually stop running to prevent damage to the heads. First thing, let's address the firmware updates and go to various settings, device settings, scroll down until you hit firmware update. And in here obviously most of the stuff is self-explanatory. But what we want to be concerned with is checking the current version, because once we go back to the computer, we're going to make sure that matches on the computer itself. Next, go down and take a look at update notification setting. Do you want to periodically check whether there is the latest firmware on the server and receive a notification? Well, yes, you always want to make sure, I believe, that your firmware is up to date. Then it'll ask you if you want to perform a test transmission. I have already done that, but we can go give it a shot. And it's okay. Go ahead and hit the return button. Next thing we want to do is jump down to check paper related settings. Now if you remember, I said something about paper mismatch settings. This can cause people in the very beginning a lot of frustration, because this is exactly what this addresses. If the driver on your computer is set to a different type of paper that you have set on the printer itself, if we go back to home, it's talking about this box right here. This is set to letter plain paper. Obviously we could set this to whatever we want, A2, whatever size, custom size, and plain paper. This is where you set your media type in here. We're going to do a check here as far as a nozzle check, and we're going to want to use plain paper. Go back out, go back down to various settings, and I'll explain this a little more. Go back to paper related settings and detect paper mismatch. If you have this set to yes, and you have a mismatch between what you have set on your driver or your application on your computer compared to what I just showed you on the front panel, it is going to come up and warn you. And it will always take the type of media that you have selected on the printer itself. I'm extremely careful about the media type that I select on the computer, so I've turned this off so I don't get warnings every time there is a mismatch between the printer and what we have set on the computer or the driver. With it set to no, what is set on the driver or the application on the computer will take priority, and in essence whatever you have selected on the front of the printer will be null. In other words, it will be turned off, and it really doesn't make any difference what you have set in there. So that's a personal choice how you want to do that. I select no so I don't keep getting warnings. Hit the back button to head back out. So we've covered firmware and paper-related settings. Jump up to device user settings. You may want to go in and double check while you're here the date and time settings, how you want the date and time shown. That's up to you. And that's about it. Go ahead and back out of that. You can actually do a print nozzle check pattern directly from the operational panel here on the printer itself. Also various types of cleaning and a head alignment. But let's jump over to the computer and work on the various settings and updates for the drivers, firmware, and software. We just checked on the operation panel the firmware and made sure it was updated. We updated the printer date and that type of thing. The next thing you want to do is take a look at your drivers, firmware, and software and make sure they're up to date. Now, this sounds fairly easy, but trust me, this gets a little bit crazy, and you'll understand what I'm talking about here in a second. Actually doing it is very easy. Trying to find out what versions are installed in some cases is absolutely impossible compared to the dialogue that is on the site. First thing you need to do is go to the Canon website, usa.canon.com. If you're in the United States like myself, other regions will have different websites that they'll actually go to. Make sure you're at the appropriate one. Type in Pro 1000, search the printer out, and go to the bottom and you'll see firmware, software, and drivers. First off, let's talk about firmware. For people that their printer is not connected to the internet, they will need to manually download the printer driver and install it through a USB cable or whatever type of connection you have to your printer. Here's the strange thing, and this is where the kind of craziness starts. Mac, Windows, we all understand that. Open up the version for Mac or Windows, because right here it says version 2.2, so you would look at this and go, hey, I think there needs to be an update. Not really. You need to open up and read the dialog for the firmware version is 2.040. Now, why these two numbers are not the same, I don't understand. I don't understand why the file doesn't represent this number. The only way you can tell this is by actually opening it up and checking out the dialog. That's about it for the firmware. And once again, if you have to do it manually, over here on the right, this is where you would download it, and it pretty much walks you through. Now let's take a look at the drivers. Hang on to your shorts, because this is where it starts to get really kind of goofy here. When you first started out with your printer, you basically had two different ways that you could upload the software and drivers. One was through the disk that came with the printer itself. The other was to do it through the website, which is actually the way I did it when I first bought the printer. The thing is that you would think by looking at this, and it says full driver and software package, that when you downloaded this and installed it, it would have the most up-to-date driver, software, and firmware on it. It does not. And you can tell this right away because the date this was uploaded was 7/2016, but yet the XPS driver for Windows was uploaded on 1/15/17. So I would definitely say this is the best way to get the programs onto your computer and get the printer kind of up to date. The only thing is, now you have to go back and make sure that the actual drivers are up to bit date. This is kind of a mystery. I'm going to tell you a little bit of a caveat about the XPS driver and the regular driver. Mac people, stand by, because you won't have to deal with the XPS driver. For Windows machines, there are two printer drivers. And the printer driver is what allows the computer to talk to the printer. You will see two different drivers in your device's area. The first driver is the basic Pro 1000 printer driver. The XPS driver actually allows you to print in 16-bit. On Mac machines, you will see a choice of printing in 16-bit, and you're only working out of a single driver. Here's the bizarre part. If we want to check what the version is, it doesn't say anywhere down here the actual version in the dialog. It says printer driver version 1.02. If we open up the devices and printer, here's our regular driver, and here is the XPS driver. To check the driver, you would think you'd be able to go in here and this would be it, 1.2. I can tell you right now, it is not the driver. If you go over to Preferences, go to Maintenance, and About, you'll see the actual version of the driver is 2.97. Now, nowhere does it say on the website what the actual version is, that 2.97. You just can't find it anywhere. Jumping over to the XPS driver, look at Properties. There's absolutely nothing written in there about the version. Go up to Preferences, go to Maintenance, and go to About, and you'll see this driver number is version 2.97. That one is up to date. Let's close out of this for a second. 5.97 matches up. 1.02 does not match up. I can tell you right now at this point, I loaded this 3 times and I got on the phone with Canon and it still comes up 2.97. So there is no way to tell. All I'm saying is think about what is being loaded and what's going on, because it does get confusing. The driver itself, this is very easy to load, but I'm going to give you a big caveat here. When you update your driver, you need to go to your devices, and this is the same with a Mac, and you need to click on here and you need to remove this device. And then you need to remove the XPS driver. Now the big caveat is when you reinstall it, you need to install the regular driver first, then the XPS driver. You cannot do it in the reverse order, and you cannot just load the XPS driver. Also on a Mac, you've got to delete the driver itself and then upload the new driver. Not hard to do, just letting you know that's what you need to do first. Now we're going to jump on over to the software, and we're going to see that it gets a little confusing all over again. Click on the software and you will actually see there's a whole list of different types of software. This date column right here can be switched to the latest date or the latest, the one that was released last. And as you can see, there's actually, I'm looking at this for the first time, there was just an update on 3.17, so my Studio Pro is actually out of date. The things that you need to download that can be valuable to you, actually all these are, but the primary ones that I use are Print Studio Pro. Canon is not quite like Epson. They will give you the ICC paper profiles for other paper manufacturers. This is a great little thing to download and easy to install. Accounting Manager, if you're going to use the Accounting Manager, you will want to download that and keep that up to date. But the Quick Utility Toolbox the media configuration tool, and the device management console are all products that I use actually kind of on a regular basis. So you would want to download this, and we'll actually take a look at those. Regarding the software itself, with Print Studio Pro, it's actually a plugin. To open up Print Studio Pro, you actually need to have an image loaded. Go up to, if you're in Photoshop, go to Automate and Print Studio Pro. Fortunately, this is fairly normal. Go to Help, About Canon Print Studio Pro, and as you can see, version 2.1, there is a new update 2.11. Let's jump back to the actual software update. When you get to this point, you have pretty much checked all your software. So a quick review. We've gone through the firmware, we've gone through the drivers, and we've gone through the software to make sure that it's updated. Next up, I just want to give you a quick look at the Canon Utility Toolbox before we actually go on to the, I'm not going to call it the last process because there is a little more calibration that you can possibly do if you like, and we're going to talk about that right here for a second. The Canon Utility Toolbox will allow you to get out to a few different areas. One of them being the media configuration tool and color calibration. Now this is not color calibration as you may think of an ICC profile. This is actually color calibration where you take individual media like a pro luster or a glossy. It could be any type of paper. The way these media configurations are loaded onto the printer itself, the printer at first load will understand what the Canon papers are and what it needs to do with the Canon papers. You can modify those, and you do that through media configuration tool and the color calibration. And what you're actually doing is an internal calibration to a specific type of media or paper. I'm going to do a whole video just on that, so if you want to see that, a follow-on, please sign up for my newsletter at rustynelsonblog.com. That's all one word, rustynelsonblog.com. That's about all I'm going to get into with this, because this is an extra added step that you can do later down the road. It's not really imperative that you do it to the initial startup. Now let's jump over to actually aligning and getting the printer head all set up. Before we actually get off of this darn computer, and trust me, I'll be as happy as you are when we do it, let's accomplish one more task on here, and that is to actually print out a print that will help us to take a look and see whether we have any nozzle problems. Now, all these things that we're doing right now, you may not have to do to actually print, but if you want to make sure, and you probably should, everything is working correctly, these next couple of steps are pretty important when you first get your printer set up. Printing preferences. We want to go to the maintenance tab, and here you will see a bunch of different tabs that we can go into: auto power settings, quiet settings, custom settings. But what we're interested in right now is a actual nozzle check. Click on that, and if you read this, it pretty much tells you exactly what you need to do. This is done on a plain sheet of paper. A4 letter size paper is the easiest thing to do. Make sure it is plain paper. Then click on print check pattern. Now we're going to jump out to back to the printer and see the pattern that it printed out, and then we're going to go through aligning the heads. And guess what? Now we know exactly what this is. After the print actually comes out, on the operational screen, this message is going to pop up: which is closer for printed color patterns. On the left, you're going to see what you should actually see. In other words, a slight stair step in all the patterns. On the right hand side, B, everything's mismatched up and you're going to see blotches, spaces. If your print looks like A, your nozzle check passed. If it looks like B, go ahead and select B. Nozzle is clogged. Do you want to start a cleaning? Well, we don't want to do a cleaning right now, so we're going to select no. Next, and this is recommended by the text from Canon and through the manual, that on the initial setup, you definitely want to come and do a printhead alignment. Go to maintenance, and it really won't make any difference whether you select letter Pro Luster up here. You can have anything up here, because you'll see in a second it actually quizzes you to find out what type of paper you're loading. Go ahead down to printhead alignment, auto. Do you want to start the auto alignment? Yes. And right here is where we specify letter size, which I have, and we'll change the type of paper to Pro Luster. I'm using Canon Pro Luster. Load 3 sheets of the specified paper in the rear tray and press OK. And that's about it. And hopefully in 12 minutes or so, we will be done with the head alignment. The printer has started printing its alignment sheets. This is what the first one looks like, and this is printed on Pro Luster. Once again, this is something that's pretty important, I feel, because you want to make sure that your machine, after jostling around, getting it set up and printing a few prints out, make sure that the heads are aligned correctly and you have a great base to work from. This is suggested in the manual and also by the text that I talked to at Canon. I guess we'll just sit and wait for the last pages to come out. See how we did. Believe it or not, that's about it. And please, 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 oh, wait a minute. There is one more thing. I'll tell you what that is in a second. Please go ahead and take just a second and subscribe. Also, I'd really appreciate it if you sign up. Plus that, you get all the notifications when videos come out like this on printing and Lightroom and photography, just in general fun stuff. Please subscribe. My video blog that I have, my newsletter is rustynelsonblog.com. Give this a thumbs up just so I know somebody's out there listening to this. The last thing that I didn't cover in here that I will in the next video, so if you sign up for the newsletter, you'll get it, is color calibration. I don't mean color calibration of the monitor. I don't mean color calibration of output profiles to the printer. What I'm talking about is this printer can do an internal calibration to specific media types. In other words, you can create your own custom media types. And I will show you how to do that through the utility box. There is a way. And it's just a little too complicated to continue on with this video, but remember, as I keep saying, and I mean it, my camera is my best excuse for adventure. In fact, in a couple of weeks, I leave to go tornado chasing. Really excited about that, hopefully some good pictures. And I really hope to see you get your camera out of the bag, take it out there, have a great time, come back and actually print it, because once you start printing, it's actually addictive. I'll see you later. Thanks for stopping by and have a lot of fun with your camera.